Today is Wednesday, January 10th. We'll tell you about the impact of snow, rain, and even tornadoes across several states and where this winter storm system is headed next. Also, we have an update on the Pentagon chief's health, and the world is paying close attention to a crisis in Ecuador. Plus, how popular social media sites are changing for teens, why NASA is delaying missions to the moon, and another round of interesting gadgets unveiled at tech's biggest trade show. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. The winter storm that stretched across the U.S. this week ended up causing devastation. High winds and tornadoes blew through parts of the Gulf Coast. Some of the worst damage was in northern Florida and southern Alabama. Tornadoes destroyed homes, ripped up roads, and left behind a trail of debris. And sadly, at least 4 people died. But that wasn't even the only storm system Americans were contending with yesterday. Another one buried cities across the plains and Midwest in snow and stranded people on highways. That same winter storm is now headed to the Northeast today. Former President Trump was back in the courtroom this week for what Politico says could be his most consequential court date so far. It was about the federal charges Trump is facing in an election interference case. Trump's team is trying to convince an appeals court their client is immune from prosecution since they say his acts following the 2020 election fell within his official duties as president. And they say it's not up to the courts to scrutinize what an official act is anyway. One moment in the hearing that's been talked about a lot came when a judge asked if, theoretically, a president could be prosecuted if he actually assassinated a political rival. To which Trump's lawyers said no, he'd still be immune unless Congress first impeached and convicted him. The Justice Department says the opposite, that presidents are not immune, no matter what Congress says, and that if they were, it would mean a, quote, extraordinarily frightening future. And the DOJ isn't alone in that. The immunity argument was also rejected by a lower court judge overseeing this case, but the former president's lawyers appealed and are still hoping to get the whole case dismissed. Or at the very least postponed, since as the AP points out, if he's reelected in November, he could just tell the Justice Department to stop prosecuting him, or he could seek a pardon for himself. After the hearing, Trump spoke to reporters, again insisting he did nothing wrong and is the victim of a political hit job. And he said if the criminal charges against him cause him to lose the next election, quote, it'll be bedlam in the country. It's not clear how quickly the appeals court will rule, but of course, we'll keep you updated. Well, new details came out this week about the defense secretary's health, surprising even the highest officials in the White House. Officials at Walter Reed National Military Center now say they've been treating Secretary Lloyd Austin for prostate cancer. He was apparently diagnosed last month and had a procedure to hopefully cure it. But then Austin got an infection and had to be rushed to the hospital where he's still being treated today. Now, as more information has come out, more criticism has come in as to why none of it was made public earlier. In fact, even President Biden is said to have just found out yesterday that Austin was diagnosed with cancer. The Pentagon press secretary explained that part of the reason for the delay is that Austin's chief of staff was also sick with the flu. Still, lawmakers say they're going to be launching an investigation into the lack of communication, and the White House and Pentagon say they're reviewing their procedures for the future. The South American country of Ecuador has descended into chaos. Riots broke out in several prisons, with about 150 prison guards taken hostage. A group of prisoners was even able to escape, and one of them was the country's most notorious gang leader, who is still on the run, with thousands of authorities now tasked with finding him. But he's really just one issue they're dealing with. Yesterday, masked men took a TV news staff hostage during a live broadcast. Local police say there were also dozens of car explosions, at least 7 police officers were kidnapped, and others have been killed. And that's just some of the violent incidents that have been reported. Intelligence officials say the attack seemed coordinated, likely by at least one gang hoping to send a message to a government that's promised to crack down on criminal enterprises. Though not a lot of details have come out yet. Ecuador's president declared a state of emergency, labeling several gangs as terror groups and directing the military to intervene. Businesses have now shut down, a nationwide curfew is in place, and in-person schooling has now been canceled all around the country. The Earth just had its hottest year ever recorded by far. The European Union's Copernicus Climate Change Service said global temperatures in 2023 were higher than in any year going back to at least 1850. Really, Copernicus says it was likely the hottest year in 125,000 years. That topped even what climate models had predicted. But a lot of scientists saw it coming since the year was full of extremes, like heat waves that gripped not only America, but also Europe, Africa, and Asia. Also, the world's oceans were especially warm, which made storms more intense. And there was a historic wildfire season in Canada. Now the new report confirms the big picture, saying the global average surface temperature fell just shy of the 1.5-degree warming limit set under the Paris Climate Agreement. And that raises questions about whether climate change has accelerated or even passed a tipping point. Though keep in mind that Paris Agreement benchmark refers to a long-term average over many decades, not just a single year. And it's very possible things start to improve, especially if emissions are cut and existing greenhouse gases are removed from the atmosphere. Other organizations like NOAA and NASA are expected to announce their own findings later this week. More news is still coming up, but first, let's take a quick break for our sponsor. I know this time of year, building healthy habits can be top of mind. So one easy way to eat clean and conveniently is with Green Chef. Green Chef takes the work out of eating better with chef-crafted, nutritionist-approved recipes featuring certified organic fruits and veggies, organic cage-free eggs, and sustainably sourced seafood. And Green Chef delivers everything you need. In fact, Green Chef is now owned by HelloFresh, so with a wider array of meal plans to choose from, there's something for everyone. I personally appreciate that I don't have to worry about a last-minute run to the grocery store. Instead, I have doable, delicious recipes alongside all the ingredients I need for a meal I can feel good about feeding to myself and my family. Like we recently enjoyed cheesy pesto chicken bowls with sauteed squash noodles and balsamic tomato topping. Yum. So go to greenchef.com/60newsworthy and use the code 60newsworthy to get 60% off plus 20% off your next 2 months. Again, that's 60% off plus 20% off your next 2 months when you go to greenchef.com/60newsworthy and use code 60newsworthy. Now back to the news. For a while, 2024 has been billed as the year American astronauts would return to the moon. But not anymore. NASA announced a few more delays in its Artemis program. So now, instead of sending 4 astronauts around the moon later this year, NASA is eyeing September of 2025. And the first human moon landing in more than 50 years was bumped from 2025 to 2026. NASA cited safety concerns with its own spacecraft and some development issues with moon suits and landers coming from private companies. Already, NASA's latest moon landing effort has been delayed repeatedly over the past decade, adding billions of dollars to the cost. Speaking of moon missions, remember we told you about a launch earlier this week that was supposed to pave the way for the first commercial moon landing without humans on board? Well, since then, that landing was called off since the spacecraft developed a fuel leak. That said, more cargo lunar landing attempts are already lined up for later this year. Meta says it's taking another step to make Facebook and Instagram more age-appropriate for teenagers. This week, the company started hiding sensitive content from anyone younger than 18. That sensitive content includes anything about self-harm, eating disorders, nudity, and more. And that's the case even if the sensitive content is shared by teenagers' own friends or accounts that they follow. Meta is also sending new notifications to teens, encouraging them to update their settings so they have more privacy. For example, they can choose to not be tagged or mentioned. Still, some critics, like one former Meta employee, says these changes don't go far enough. Of course, this all comes as Meta has been facing intense pressure recently in both the US and European Union. It was actually just a few months ago that 41 states sued Meta for allegedly addicting kids to Facebook and Instagram. And the EU has been demanding answers even more recently. Next up, Meta plans to make even more changes, and not just for teens. In the next few weeks, Meta plans to stop allowing anyone from searching for certain sensitive topics on Facebook or Instagram. As expected, some of the biggest names in tech, transportation, healthcare, sustainability, and more have pulled out all the stops for the major tech conference CES 2024. Here are just a few of the latest inventions that made their debut on the showroom floor this week. So there's smart grocery carts that show video ads on a screen that will actually suggest products based on what customers put in their carts. There are smart locks that let you get into your home using facial recognition and fingerprint scanners instead of keys. A cocktail making machine that can make your cocktail in seconds. And there's also a new motorized pet door that will let your cat or dog come and go as they please while keeping other critters out since it will only open for your pet's collar tag. Of course, those are just a few examples. There is a whole lot more, including electric cars, home health trackers, noise-canceling masks, and a whole bunch of AI. CES 2024 runs through Friday. The Girl Scouts officially launched cookie season this week. And of course, it's selling all of the favorites like Thin Mints, Samoas, Tagalongs, and so on. As always, proceeds from each box sold stay with local troops and councils, letting Girl Scouts take part in different experiences throughout the year, like service projects and summer camps. Even if you don't know a Girl Scout, you can still get your cookie fix. Starting next month, you can just buy them online. Or you can go to the Girl Scout Cookie Finder to find a booth near you. That's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Work Wednesday, when we break down one interesting career or work-related news story every Wednesday. But first, this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. In 2024, I am doing well to avoid any extreme New Year's resolutions or obsessing about what I need to improve. Yes, I'm always looking to be the best version of myself, but I'm doing that by simply recognizing all that I'm already doing well and working toward improving the small stuff that would help even more. And therapy continues to support me in that process. I really do think of it like going to the gym or a personal trainer, but for my mental health. And honestly, how we think and feel impacts everything else in our lives. So if you're thinking about trying therapy, BetterHelp is an easy way to get started. It's online only and designed to be convenient, flexible, and work with your schedule. You can talk with your therapist through messaging, phone, or video. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can always switch for no extra charge to ensure you get the right fit. Celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit betterhelp.com/newsworthy today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/newsworthy. Okay, now back to Work Wednesday. So millions of American gig workers, janitors, home care workers, construction workers, truckers, security guards, and so on could now be considered employees instead of independent contractors. The U.S. Labor Department just issued its final rule on this subject, marking what the Washington Post calls one of the most expansive regulatory actions taken by the Biden Labor Department so far. It basically expands federal labor laws that require employers to give employees certain benefits and protections. Think minimum wage, overtime pay, unemployment insurance, and Social Security benefits. Those rights are not extended to independent contractors, though, so the classification matters. And the new rule says employers need to use a certain test to determine who's really an employee and who's self-employed. That test considers factors like how much financial investment a worker is putting into their job, what opportunities the worker has for turning a profit, and more. App-based platforms like Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash say they don't expect the new rule to impact them. But some business groups say it really depends on how the Labor Department decides to enforce it. Plus, the new rule also gives individual workers the right to sue if they think they've been misclassified, so more companies could be impacted that way. Labor advocates say this is a necessary change to protect some of the most essential workers. But other trade groups are against it, saying the government should not be getting in the way of how companies and employees handle work arrangements. Either way, the rule is being formally published today and will take effect in March. Well, thank you so much for joining us as part of your daily routine. We'll catch you up with more news to know tomorrow. Until then, have a great day.